Good morning. This is a new quarter, 2024 quarter. So for this quarter, we want to just think about pastoral counseling, and that's especially for theological method in pastoral counseling. Pastoral counseling is not only for pastors. It's not only for Christians, but that is kind of focused on helping Christians. But the pastoral counseling is not only, for your own church members. You have churches. And then pastoral counseling is not free. It can be free, but at the same time, pastoral counseling is not limited to pastors and Christians. Well, we know what the counseling is, but there are secular counselings and pastoral counselings, or any other religious counselings. I don't know if there is, Buddhist counseling or something like that, but there is pastoral counseling stuff that it started like about 100 years ago. That's started in Northern America, mainly America. So it's been only 100 years history, but it's been boomed because America is founded by Christians. When the Mayflower came over to this continent, and then they have secular or clinical counseling, but there were Christians mainly at the first time. So, and then later on, they wanted to develop the pastoral counseling, because we want to just take a look at why. But basically, that's for helping Christians and church members. And so for this quarter, we want to just take a look what the pastoral counseling is, and how to practice it, and how the pastoral counseling help Christians. And that is a unique area, because even though that is popular in USA, it's not that popular in other countries much. But that is pretty designated area for Christians. Well, this is the first thing I want to just talk about, the definition of pastoral counseling that is provided by AAPC, American Association of Pastoral Counseling. But you know what? The AAPC, American Association of Pastoral Counseling, is merged with ACPE, Association of Clinical Pastoral Education. Well, that is CPE, what's called the CPE. Lots of theological seminaries have CPE programs, so the pastor candidates or even pastors can have opportunity to counsel people in a normal situations like mainly in hospitals. So they have a CPE program and coordinators and advisors or supervisors. They take care of the seminary students or kind of uh, just uh, pastors who just started their careers, and because they want to know how to take care of Christians who are in struggles or vulnerable situations. Um, so because hospitals are kind of close to Christianity, and not only Christians, but there are chaplains, but the chaplains not only pastors. There can be monks and priests and um, Muslims and rabbis. They are serving the patients in hospital settings. So when patients or their families need any kind of religious help, the chaplains can help those people. For example, well, a hospital is not necessary to have only Christian pastors or priests. Well, if a particular hospital is founded by a particular religion like Christians or Catholics, they can have only pastors or priests because that hospital is founded by those people or that religion. But in general, hospitals have chaplains, uh, whether that is a paid job or not. They have chaplains, not only Christian priests or pastors, but Buddhist monks. As I said, rabbis or any other religious leaders, even Muslims, because they know their patients and families need the kind of religious services when they are in the hospitals. Um, because even medical field and hospitals, they know those kind of religious help or spiritual help is demanding, and actually that is working well. Um, so the patients can get help from doctors and nurses, um, or other in or medical services. But when those patients get excuse me, get religious services like uh, religious counseling or visiting or prayers for them, and then uh, they maybe I'm pretty sure those patients and their families have their own religions, but their religious leaders are not available always, but at least they have hospital chaplains in those hospitals so that they can get help. Um, but I'm pretty sure a Christian patient or his or her families doesn't want to ask Muslims or Buddhist monks to do something for them, but basically religious leaders have kind of basic skills and heart for helping patients and their families so they can uh, get help when they ask to the chaplains. And I used to serve on general hospital in Garden Grove, and the head chaplain, is a great guy, and he was he's very old, but I haven't contacted him for like 10 years or so. I don't know if he's still working there or not. But he and the hospital staffs, the volunteers especially, are great. And he's a Christian, uh, but there are um, not some other chaplains, hospital chaplains, volunteering uh, to help those patients especially. So uh, when I on my duty day, I used to go there and check in and have a list what kind of patients are there, and then what kind of problems they have, and then it says even the religions when they opened, what kind of religions they have. Those are on the list, and I take a look at it, and I used to start from emergency room. So when it's not that busy, I can knock the door and ask them what can I do for them, and I used to comfort them and pray for them. If they say yes to my offer, and then I used to talk with this and that. And if they need any kind of religious help, if I can do that, I do. I used to do it. But if they need Buddhist monk or any other religious leaders or chaplains, I have networking leads, so I called or left a note for those chaplains, something like that. So even the general hospitals have chaplains, and they are serving uh, the patients and their family members. This is great, and even medical field and scientists are believing that those kind of religious services are helping their patients a lot. Uh, Anyway, AAPC is merged with ACPE in 2019. So the AAPC leaders are now working in ACPE. So ACPE is mainly focusing on training pastors or pastor candidates. Um, so they are working together right now. Pastoral counseling, the definition must be like this by APC. Pastoral counseling is a unique form of psychotherapy which uses spiritual resources. We ought to just take a look at this. Resources as well as a psychological understanding. Psychotherapy, you can say, for healing angles, for healing and growth. It is provided by certified pastoral counselors, certified certified pastoral counselors who are not only mental health professionals, so mental health professionals, but also who have also had an in-depth religious and theological training. Let's say religious training. Okay. So this is the definition of pastoral counseling. So they are supposed to have a certificate. What kind of certificate they want to have? So all pastors are not cannot. All pastors can provide pastoral counseling. Well, no, because pastors counsel people, their church members, and they talk and they give some directions and comfort, and provide some other resources like books or medias and something like that. But when we say pastoral counseling, that is more professional. That is more professional counseling. So for that, AAPC or ACPE, they just have a certain program for training, religious training, and mentor has informations and knowledges and skills, and that's psychotherapy. And so when a pastor has kind of certificate from a CPE, then we can call that person pastoral counselor. Okay? Because we don't call pastors, the local church pastors, pastoral counselors. Okay? Even though they provide a certain level of counseling, I'm not ignoring or despising those people. They are doing a great job. But when we call pastoral counseling, that is more professional, okay? Because they need to get religious training, and at the same time, mentor has training too, including knowledge and skills. So pastoral counseling is provided by those pastoral counselors, and they use spiritual resources. Let's talk about the psychotherapy first. Let me get the mark here. That is working. There's that. Lots of markers are there. Oh yeah, this is better. And so these are trash. Psychotherapy. We know what the psychotherapies are, like psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis, studied by Sigmund Freud, and relational, and cognitive, REBT, and reality therapies. There are many kinds of psychotherapies we can use. We don't want to just stick with one psychotherapy, but even though we know we can touch all kinds of psychotherapies, but depends on counselors or psychotherapists. they excuse me, they can have any they can have any favorite psychotherapy they want to use. So they use psychotherapy. Okay, that is more science. Okay, plus spiritual resources like what do you have, like Bible, prayer, okay, and spiritual books, and any other spiritual trainings or techniques like meditation, something like that, or singing, even singing, or all kinds of spiritual resources we can use. So, but the secular counselings, they don't use spiritual resources. Well, it depends on the counselors. They can adopt certain kind of things like meditation, because meditation is not limited to Christians or religions. But mainly they don't use these kind of stuff, but psychotherapies only, right? Because they believe science and brain and something like that. They can have these kind of psychotherapies, so they don't think they need any other spiritual resources. Those are what happening to secular counselors. But pastoral counselors, they use theology, Bible, or something like that, all kinds of spiritual resources. That's the definition. That's the definition. Okay. So the pastoral counseling is provided by certified pastoral counselors who got religious training and mental health professionals and trainings or education. And they use not only psychotherapy but also spiritual resources for helping others. So that's what that and what is the goal? These are the goal: healing and growth. Healing and growth. Okay. So this is the definition of the pastoral counseling. Okay. So pastoral counseling is not, they use psychotherapy, okay, but on top of that they want spiritual resources because they want people spiritually too, okay, not only by psychotherapy. Okay, that's the definition by APC. All right. Across the nations, more than 3,000 pastors are serving, pastoral counselors are serving, okay? That is including treatment for persons with mental disorders. Well, pastoral counselors can help regular people, who does not have mental disorders, we can diagnose. But when they come to, pastoral counselors, they pay for that, and then they can get pastoral counseling services. Because normally people don't know what kind of disorders they have. Basically, people don't think they have disorders or sickness or something like that, but they know something is happening to themselves or their, including, their emotions or even bodies, because psychosomatic means our mind is connected with our body. So when we got physical problem, we can get mental problems too. When we got mental problems, we can get physical problems too. because when we are under big stress, we can get lots of problems like a stomach ache or diarrhea, or we can lose, easily lose the eyesight, and we can have, big problems like that. Because I know somebody who lost 1 million in a day because somebody stole that, and he couldn't see things right for a while because he got shocked and he was under big stress, and since then he has to wear the kind of eyeglasses. He didn't use eyeglasses until then, but after the big stress and the problems, he had to wear the eyeglasses for looking at the letters or something like that. But as I said, oh, I got mental disorder. Oh, I got depression. Or I got insomnia or something like that. And then they diagnose themselves first and come to counselors and psychotherapists and psychiatrists. No, they think and feel, or they have problems mentally, and they come to counselors or psychiatrists for figuring out what's going on to themselves, and they can know what kind of problems they have, and they can get some solutions for just overcoming that kind of situations and problems. And counseling for adults, yes. Adolescents, yes, they have lots of problems, and children, families, and couples, and substance abuse treatment like alcohol, drugs, or any other chemicals like bond or gas, something like that, and wellness programs, religious retreats, spiritual direction, clinical training, consultation to corporations, outreach preventive services in prisons and military settings and schools. There are military chaplains too, right? And schools and community education. Okay, so pastoral counselors are working in various areas like those. So, as I said, pastoral counseling is not limited to church members or churches, because they can serve the community and people in many areas like those. So, but the pastoral that can be tricky when you don't understand what the pastoral counseling means. Okay? So 3,000 pastoral counselors means certified pastoral counselors in the United States. Okay? Simple. At any time, individuals, couples, or families can be confronted by uncertainties and life experiences which threaten to exhaust emotional and spiritual resources. For example, when people lose their spouses or children, any relatives, parents, brothers, sisters, they are under big stress. And especially in this pandemic, people are struggling with financial areas, because lots of stores are closing, and even churches are closing. A report says 1 out of 5 churches will be closed because of the pandemic, and airplanes are parked in and stuck there. They are not moving at all. Only few airplanes are flying the air. Recently, a friend of mine just visited Korea, and he had to take 14 days quarantine and spend some weeks there and came back. And the friend, I mean, he's taking quarantine right now. I don't think he needs it because Korea is way safer than USA right now in this pandemic. So when he visited Korea, he had to 2 weeks quarantine time, but I don't think he needs it. But he's doing that by himself. Nobody asks him to do it, but he's doing that voluntarily. Because I don't know why. Because America, I think so far Korea has 50 million or 60 million people, but they only lost 3,000. I don't know. I don't think they didn't lose lots of people, but I guess 3,000 people died. But in the United States, we have 7 million people who got coronavirus, and we're gonna lose 200,000 people by the end of this year, I think. Anyway, that is tragedy. So we are under big stress. We are losing people, families, friends, and lots of stores are closing, and lots of people are losing their jobs. They can't. Many people can't pay rent or mortgages. There are so many things that are happening in this world. And in the United States, lots of people are under big stress, and they can get mental problems too. Not only financial problem, or not only relational problems, not only health problems. We have lots of mental problems because of those. Okay. For that, the loss of a loved one, parent-teen conflict, loss of job, or the care of an elderly parent, on just a few of life's transitions and crises that can be depleting. So, life is not easy. Life is not easy, whether they have lots of money or not, whether they have higher status or not. We have lots of problems in our lives, and we face, sometimes we face big tragedies or big loss and and then who's gonna help those people? Who's gonna help those people? Okay, we need somebody who can help us. Well, there are strong people, and they know what's going on, and they have strength to break through those problems and barriers, and they try to resolve some problems and they can have strength to overcome their mental problems. But what about others? There are weak people, and depends on what kind of people they are. Um, basically, we all have problems, and some people need others' help. We cannot live ourselves. So, as I said, this is Chinese people, people in people that is actually that looks like this. I mean, which means that's in, which means two people are helping each other. That's in, that's people. Okay, we can see this kind of a thing from this because we just pronounce people and we just think about people, but when we read Chinese characters like this, we know that some people don't know that, but we know how the letter in started like this. So we need help. We need our parents' help. Parents need children's help. Okay? Businessman needs other business people's help. Employer needs employees. Okay? So we are helping each other. We need some people. And when we are vulnerable, we need counselors. When we are sick, we need medical doctors or nurses or any other caregivers. Okay? Why some individuals turn to a psychologist, social worker, or a psychiatrist? Others want support and the opportunity to discuss their problems or illness in a spiritual context. Okay? So we need those kind of help. And religious communities like churches, Buddhist temples and mosques and synagogues. Religious communities are one of those principal gateways for individuals seeking assistance with depressing grief, marital conflict, substance abuse, family violence, juvenile delinquency, and AIDS, among other issues and societal problems. Well, why we go church? We go church because we love our God, and we know that God is loving us. So we go church for worshiping God, but at the same time, that is horizontal, God and people. But at the same time, peoples are gathering together, and people, and they form a community. That's also called churches, okay? And they expect certain kind of help, not only from God, but also from other community members. And churches that have pastors, and people depend on their pastors for worshiping God, like services, but at the same time, spiritual directions. Okay. Church members, Christians. Why Christians they have pastors? They they are leading the services. Well, other people can lead the services too, but they got special trainings, or that's their job. And Christians have religious leaders for worship for worshiping God, or properly or right way. Um, well, depends on what kind of concepts, right or proper. Spiritual direction, that is a big help. So church members, when they have those kind of problems, the pastor is the first person they have in their mind to get a help for that. Okay? For last 10 or 20 years, even U.S. government has been thinking that and practicing that pastors and religious leaders are first contact per people when their religious groups and communities have problems. Well, lots of Christians are asking their pastors to pray for them. And when they ask, their pastor's prayer, they want to explain what's going on. Whether they have financial problems, relationship problems, or, for the futures or for the next steps, they need somebody to help them. And the pastors are, must be the first person they want to contact. That's why the government wants to work with churches, which means churches and church pastors, because they know the church members, they know the communities, and they are leaders. And their spiritual leaderships is kind of strong, so that pastors can lead their groups to work with and work for kind of good projects, like helping the communities, and especially the churches are for not only for worshiping God, not only for just relating with other church members, but churches are basically for the communities, spreading gospels, and helping community. These are main jobs of churches. So they want to just work with churches and any other religious groups. So, and then that is very effective. And religious communities are one of the principal getaways. Yeah. So, that history says churches have schools, preschools, kindergartens, elementary, junior high, high school even. And churches started lots of hospitals. And churches started lots of non-profit organizations for reaching out and helping their communities. So that's why that means that is still going on. And well, I'm just talking about the Christians only, but lots of Muslims and synagogues and Buddhist temples, they are doing their jobs too, like that. Anyway, the religious communities are very strong, because they have the same religion, because they have similar lifestyles, and they are very close, not only because they know each other, because they are serving one God as a community. So they are very strong. And they want to just help each others, and especially pastors are there for helping people. Okay? Excuse me. In 1992, Gallup poll, that's long. Just forget it. But, you know, we can get some ideas. I don't know if that statistics is still valuable, but it's kind of a long one. And I'm sorry for that. But at the time, 66% of people prefer to receive counseling from a person who represented their spiritual values. For example, Christians and church members, they want to get kind of counseling or help from the person who are in the group, who are in the Christian group. If you are Christians, you don't want to ask help from a Buddhist monk or Muslims because you are believing that as Christians you can get better or proper and understandable and acceptable help from church leaders. Okay, and 81% said they wanted their own spiritual values respected and integrated into the counseling process. So, as Christians, you want to just see a pastoral counselor, or any general clinical counselors. But I don't think you want to get a counseling from Buddhist monk or Muslim leaders or rabbis because we are thinking that as Christians we are thinking that their spiritual direction is somewhat different with the Christian spiritual direction, right? Right? Okay. I'm not saying which is better or not. I'm just talking about the community and the groups. Which means at the time Christians were majority. I don't know if that is still majority in the United States, but because Christians are because Christians are the number of Christians are declining steeply because of many reasons. London, England, they lost lots of Christians. Well, maybe they got lots of immigrants from other Euro countries, and about 30 years ago, long times ago, Muslims wanted to make London, England, it's the second Istanbul, which means the second biggest city of Muslims. And actually that is what's going on in London, I think. I've never been there, but based on some journals or statistics, there are lots of Muslims in mosques in London, which was the center of Christians in England. Okay. And then churches sold their church buildings to Muslims and even the to bar owners. So they people are drinking in a building which were church buildings. It's sad, but that's what happened. That's what happened. Okay. Well, so as I said, each religious groups and their members, they want to get help the same from the same religious leaders and professionals. Okay, that's the pastoral counselings, the kind of a little sketch. And I want to just think, you want to just think about the pastoral counseling versus clinical counseling. There are some differences. Well, actually, I just touched a little bit about that, but this is the summary by Dr. I forgot the name, but I'm gonna just. Did I give any credits for that? I don't think it says that, but I'm gonna just give you the credit later on. Clinical counselors such as clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and marriage and family therapists are licensed and regulated by various governmental boards and professional associations. Right. Because we don't want to have counselors, who don't have any credentials. Because we don't have any medical doctors in the hospitals who doesn't have any license, right? If you want to work for patients in a hospital, you want to get medical doctor license and registered nurses and any other nurses or any other there are lots of groups, right? Not only RNs but I don't know, I forgot the names, but there are certain various of medical workers in a hospital. Okay, X-ray technicians or something like that. And then they need a license because so we can trust them. If they don't have any license, how we can trust those people, and how we can trust those medical services from them, right? Clinical counselors, they need to get training and education, and they need to get a license. Pastoral counselors, such as pastors, ministerial counselors, chaplains, and church counselors, are credentialed and regulated by various ecclesiastical governing churches and may be influenced by professional associations. Well, that's a little bit wide concept, but as I said, pastoral counseling is more professionals, but the pastors, they need to get licenses too. What about the chaplains? They need to get licenses too. And church, schools in churches, they need to get licensed teachers, right? We all need those kind of credentials and licenses, so we can provide proper services, and then other people can get they know that they can have proper services from those people. So we need a license. So, but the license is who's gonna provide them the licenses? The organizations. And clinical counselings and pastoral counselings, those two things are just have they have their own organizations and governments, who can provide certificates and licenses for their services, right? And there are some differences between clinical counseling and pastoral counseling approaches. Clinical counselors have only one contact structure for interacting with their client. This is the professional setting of the office, and they are strongly discouraged from access and interaction beyond that professional counseling relationship. But the pastoral counselor may have access and relationship to the person outside of the formal dialogue and counseling setting. In other words, the only relationship allowed the clinical counselor is the formal counseling process, while the pastoral counselor may relate of the client on several levels of respect. A prospective client must determine which context is best for their particular needs. Well, this is simple. Clinical counselors, they only meet their clients in the counseling setting, and that's it. They don't even say hi, or they don't chat with their clients on the streets, or in a bar or cafe or in a restaurant, because that's what they do. Okay, that's it. But the pastoral counselors, if you are working with pastoral counselors in your church, in your community, he's there or she's there, okay, and they can come work with you in many other things, and they just talk in churches and church cafes or cafeterias or many other places, in your office or on the street or in the church courtyard or some in many other places. Even though there is not professional counseling on the streets or in many other places except in your office, but you can access those people, those clients. Well, that is kind of a broader meaning of pastoral counseling as professionals, but in a broader meaning, pastoral counselors, especially pastors, can access to their church members anytime they want. They can call, email, text, and they can meet, or they can even visit their houses. But the clinical counselors can visit their clients. So the big difference is the clinical counselors cannot visit or cannot ask their clients to come, but they have to wait until their clients come to their offices. But the pastoral counselors, broader meaning, they can call, email, text, they can talk with them in other places besides their office for the professional counselors. That's the big difference. You can access that. Worldview. In a clinical setting, the counselor is limited in the degree to which they may discuss and direct the client from the perspective of counselor's own values. Counseling theory, as understood in the behavioral sciences, must be primary determinant of the perspective and advice given. It is acceptable for a clinical counselor who is Christian to discuss their values with the client who specifically asks, but giving direct advice or counsel consistent with such values may not always be allowed. In a pastoral counseling context, both religious values and behavioral science theories and methodologies are free to be open is broad, but the counselor is expected to counsel and advise from the perspective of the religion he or she represents. So that's a long story, but it is simple. Clinical counselors, they are not supposed to use their religious backgrounds at all. And they want to just provide the counseling, psychotherapies only. They don't want to use their religions, okay? You don't want to expect the clinical counselors to use their religious skills. If they do that, the counselors will get in trouble and you will get confused. Okay? We go hospitals because we are expecting medical doctors to practice their medical skills and techniques and the professional knowledges. You don't expect kind of meditations or third party treatments or something like that. Okay, it's the same thing. We don't want to expect clinical counselors to practice, any other religious things. But we know and understand that the pastoral counselors can use certain kind of skills and techniques and methods to help us. Okay? So they can use Bible verses, they can even give us messages, or they can pray for us, they can suggest us to meditate together or something like that. Okay, depends on what kind of religious backgrounds they have. We can expect that as clients. We can expect pastoral counselors can practice their religions. Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. Education and training. Well, clinical counselors are required to meet certain basic education, and pastoral counselors may have equal or distinctly different educational and training backgrounds too. Okay, but pastoral counselors, even though pastoral counselors use the psychotherapies, what clinical counselors use, but on top of that, pastoral counselors can get theology and special trainings for the counseling. Pastoral counselings. So that's the difference. So we can understand that there are not, but those are kind of a big differences, but at the same time they are sharing common knowledges and trainings. Okay, so that's the difference. But the worldview and approaches and using methods, those can be huge difference. Services fees, clinical counselors and pastoral counselors, they take fees. But usually the clinical counselors get a certain fees, but the pastoral counselors use a little bit different. It can be same, but it can be different too. Pastoral counselors may work on a fee-based sliding scale, which means you have good enough money to pay in full, and you just pay full. But if you can't afford to pay, you can just pay as much as you want, and you can. And if you will donating or may provide services fees free as a ministry. Generally, pastoral counseling is not covered by insurance. That's the difference too. Okay, all right. So those are kind of differences. Well, today we just covered confidentiality is about the same. I think that's it. So, as pastoral counselors, they have to just be cautious on the confidentiality too. Just saying, as counselors, you want to just keep the 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 confidential stuff. You have to know what kind of counselors you are, clinical counselors or pastoral counselors. You have to be careful on the confidentiality because that is crucial. You can have any excuses for that. Okay, confidentiality is very important, but the pastoral counselors have more. um, they have pastoral counselors have to focus on the confidentiality more because they can meet their clients in other situations or in other settings. And if you forgot, if you forget what's what happened in the counseling setting, you can get confused and you can forget, you know. So accidentally you can open the confidential stuff in a group or to other people, to other, I mean, to the clients, families, something like that. That is very dangerous. So you don't want to do that. So be careful on the confidentiality. That's the big issue. Big issue. It can be very dangerous. So that is that can be make any legal problems too. So we need to be careful. Okay, I think that's it. That's it for the first class on this quarter. So I'm looking forward to see you next week for the next one.